Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into a universe that has quietly, but absolutely profoundly redefined modern fiction. We're talking about Robin Hobb's masterpiece, The Realm of the Elderlings. Honestly, when you look at the sheer emotional impact of this series, it easily stands shoulder to shoulder with titans like The Lord of the Rings or A Song of Ice and Fire. If you haven't read these books yet, well, you are in for an incredible, if somewhat emotionally devastating treat.
So what actually makes a fantasy epic truly unforgettable? If I asked you that right now, you might immediately think of intricate world building, explosive magic systems, or, massive armies clashing. And sure, those are the usual beloved tropes. But what Robin Hobb proves with this massive 16-book saga is that true, lasting impact isn't just about dragons or sprawling wars. The secret sauce here is actually devastating, deeply intimate psychological immersion. Okay, let's dive into this. When Robin Hobb published Assassin's Apprentice back in 1995, she completely disrupted the epic fantasy paradigm. At a time when the genre was heavily dominated by the sprawling, action-driven, multi-POV plots of authors like Robert Jordan, Hobb took a radical turn inward. It was a massive shift. I mean, think about the sweeping style of the Stormlight Archive or the First Law. Hobb gave us the exact opposite with the Farseer trilogy. It's claustrophobic. It is an intensely focused story seen entirely through the eyes of a single, deeply traumatized protagonist. We aren't looking at a sweeping battlefield from a bird's-eye view. We are trapped inside the mind of a royal bastard just trying to survive it.
Now, to really understand our protagonist's struggles, we have to look at the world he's born into. The story centers on the Six Duchies. They're ruled by the Farseer line from Buckkeep, which is this ascetic, highly practical stone fortress. But, and this is key, this geopolitical federation is incredibly fragile. On one side, you have the cosmopolitan maritime coastal duchies who are bearing the brunt of brutal external raids. On the other, you've got the conservative, agrarian inland duchies who deeply resent paying for a coastal war. It's a mess. And those realistic geopolitical tensions are exactly what scheming politicians exploit. Take the power-hungry antagonist, Prince Regal. He uses that exact inland versus coastal resentment to tear the kingdom apart from the inside, and man, you just love to hate him for it. And right in the middle of this absolute powder keg is our main guy, a young boy named FitzChivalry Farseer. Because Fitz is the illegitimate son of the prince-in-waiting, he's immediately surrounded by this complex web of royal figures pulling him in a million different directions. You've got his grandfather, the aging King Shrewd, his uncle Verity, the dutiful heir, his other uncle, Regal, who absolutely despises him, but thankfully he has some crucial grounding figures too. Burrich, the gruff stablemaster, Chade, the hidden assassin master, and Molly, a fiery early love interest. But the real tragedy here? Fitz is essentially owned by his royal bloodline. He's just a piece on a chessboard, maneuvered solely as a tool for the throne. That constant sense of being a tool rather than a real person leads to a profound isolation. Just listen to this quote from Fitz early on in the story. "I had discovered one denizen of the keep who was at least as alone as I was." That line just hits so hard. He's literally locked in a cage of his own birth. He isn't allowed a normal childhood, he can't openly claim his family, and he's forced to live in the shadows as a royal assassin. He is a young boy surrounded by a bustling, crowded court, yet he is entirely, heartbreakingly alone. The absolute genius of how Hobb tells this story lies in its narrative architecture. This isn't your standard hero's journey where we're discovering the world in real time alongside a naive kid. Actually, the Farseer books are a first-person retrospective memoir. They're written by an older, severely scarred Fitz under the alias Tom Badgerlock. That framing device changes everything. Every single page is saturated with his regret and this heavy foreknowledge of tragedy. You are reading a memoir of survival, not some triumphant victory lap. It adds this incredible melancholic weight to every happy moment because you just know the other shoe is going to drop.
And this brilliantly illustrates how Hobb grounds for world, not just in politics, but in culture. The magic systems here are completely tangled up in societal standing. First, you have the skill. This is a noble, revered hereditary telepathy used exclusively by the royal Farseer line. But on the flip side, you have the wit. This is an earthier, natural magic that lets users bond with animals. But here's the catch. Society absolutely despises the wit. They actively persecute its users, culturally condemning it as dirty, beast magic. The ultimate conflict? Fitz actually possesses both, so he's constantly at war with his own nature and the society he lives in. But don't think for a second that having magic makes Fitz's life easy. There's this wonderfully vivid description of using the skill in the books.
It's like trying to sip from a fire hose, too much, too fast, and you'll wind up more scrambled than a plate of Sunday morning eggs. It's a hilarious line, but it points to a deadly serious rule in Hobbes' universe. Magical power is never, ever free. It exacts a severe physical and mental toll. In the realm of the Elderlings, magic is an addiction and a massive burden. It is definitely not a standard superpower that just magically fixes your problems.
Which brings us to a concept that completely defines the reading experience for anyone picking these up: emotional equity. A lot of readers talk about Hobbes' slow burn pacing. If you prefer fast-paced, action-heavy fantasy, this might initially catch you off guard. But it's not slow just for the sake of it. It's a deliberate, brilliant psychological tool. Hobbes dedicates extensive time to the mundane, quiet details of Fitz's daily existence. His chores, his studies, his quiet moments just staring out a window. By making us live through these long periods of calm, she builds our emotional equity. So when the eventual trauma hits, and oh, it definitely hits, you feel it acutely because you are deeply bound to the rhythm of his life. Because of this deep investment, the thematic depth of Assassin's Apprentice is just staggering. We're exploring the ethics of duty versus personal freedom, the heavy lasting cost of violence, and the crushing weight of history on a single soul. Not to mention navigating intense childhood trauma and abandonment. You see, Fitz's true rebellion isn't about him pulling out a magic sword and overthrowing empires. His rebellion is that he stubbornly chooses to feel, to love, and to remember, in a world that is desperately trying to forge him into a cold, unfeeling weapon.
So the crucial point here is how Fitz interacts with destiny itself, because he isn't acting alone. Enter the Fool. The Fool is a white prophet, a being who can literally see the branching paths of the future. But here's the kicker. A prophet can't change the future alone. They need a catalyst, and Fitz is that catalyst. This creates an incredibly complex, intensely codependent relationship. I mean, you really have to question the ethics of the Fool's actions sometimes. The Fool loves Fitz deeply, yet constantly has to manipulate him and push him into absolute misery just to save the world. It is fascinating, but incredibly emotionally fraught.
Speaking of the Fool, they are easily one of the most fascinating characters in all of fantasy. Initially appearing as King Shrewd's witty, sharp-tongued court jester, the Fool is a being of fluid gender and transformative identities. Across the series, the Fool assumes completely different personas, like the female woodcarver Amber or the wealthy Lord Golden. This was hugely groundbreaking. In a genre that traditionally relies so heavily on patriarchal authority and rigid masculine roles, the Fool constantly challenges that order. They completely defy simple categorization, keeping both the reader and Fitz constantly guessing. Now, what's really interesting is this exact phrase used to describe the bond between Fitz and the Fool: two halves of a whole. It just perfectly encapsulates them. It transcends standard friendship, it transcends physical orientation, and it transcends gender binaries. It's a spiritual, almost cosmic union. They are intricately bound by fate, love, and sacrifice, giving us readers one of the most profound relationships ever put to paper. Now, you might be wondering, does the story just stay stuck in Fitz's trauma forever? No way. As the overarching series progresses, Hobb expands the universe dramatically. She shifts our perspective entirely away from the Six Duchies and takes us south to Bingtown, the mysterious Rainwild, and the Empire of Jamalia. Without spoiling anything major, this is where we get sentient, living ships, awakening dragons, and societies exploring entirely different class structures and egalitarian politics. You suddenly realize that the political and ecological changes of this world are all merging into one grand, sprawling history. Let's move on and see how this all builds, because to get the full experience, the reading order is absolutely crucial. Here's how it goes. You absolutely have to begin with the Farseer trilogy, starting with Assassin's Apprentice. That's your foundation. Then you move to the Live Ship Traders trilogy, which introduces that wider world we just talked about. Next, you return to Fitz in the Tawnyman trilogy, followed by the dragon-focused Rainwild Chronicles. And finally, it all beautifully, tragically converges in the Fitz and the Fool trilogy. Yes, it is a massive 16-book commitment, but I promise you, the payoff is beyond anything you can imagine. The legacy of this series is literally monumental. Here's a fun little piece of trivia before we wrap up. The author, Margaret Astrid Lindholm Ogden, actually chose the androgynous pseudonym Robin Hobb to signal a tonal shift from her earlier urban fantasy works into this sweeping, slow-burn epic style. And, well, it clearly worked. Today, within the fantasy community, the realm of the Elderlings has received universal acclaim. It's widely considered one of the greatest achievements in fantasy, heavily influencing modern character-driven epics, all because it dared to look inward at the devastating human cost of saving the world.
Which leaves us with one final, very important thought to close out this explainer. The realm of the Elderlings isn't just a story you read, it's a life you experience alongside FitzChivalry Farseer. It will test your heart, it will make you ache, and it will change how you view fantasy storytelling forever. So the question isn't whether these books are good enough for you to read. The real question is, are you ready to pay the emotional price for greatness? If you are, go open the first page of Assassin's Apprentice. You absolutely won't regret it. Thanks for hanging out with me for this explainer, and happy reading.